Hey everybody, Brian Goulet here of GouletPens.com, and it's episode number 278 of Goulet Q&A. This is going to be the last one of 2019 because we're nearing the end of the season here. Next week, we got Christmas coming, and I'm taking some time off, so this is going to be the last one for me. So I'm going to try and make it a good one for you, but we'll be coming back in January, so not to worry. Hopefully this will hold you over. But we are going to have some great videos coming out here soon. In fact, I think today with the release of this video, we're going to be showing the 2020 special edition Lamy All-Star Tourmaline. I don't physically have it to show you here right now because Andy's literally cutting it together right now, using it and shooting some footage so we can get that video out. I do have some of the ink on my fingers though. Nice color. It's a nice teal color. I think it looks great. We have it up on the site if you want to sign up for the email notification. It's not coming until February, but we have it up on the site. So that's pretty cool. We don't always get to see a preview of that in advance, so I'm super happy to have that up on our site. Today I'm going to be talking to you about quality control of high-end pens, if the TWSBI 580 is worth the $30 upgrade from the ECO, and then great pens for small hands, among other things. So I'm excited about this one today. Personal things that I've been up to, let's see here. We had our choir concert this past weekend. My wife and I sing together on a pretty regular basis at our church, and our kids are now of the age where they can both be in the children's choir. So that's pretty cool. They do their little children's choir thing, we do our adult choir thing. Every now and then we get to sing all together, and that was one of the events we did this past weekend. So it was pretty great. First time, I think it might have been the first time that all four of us sang together as one choral unit in some fashion. And it was pretty great. I was like, they're like a proud papa. People came up to me afterwards and they were like, you know, your singing was fine, but the look on your face watching your kids sing was what made the event for me. And I was like, well, it's real. the feels are real. Anyway, so it's pretty cool. Rachel and I met singing, and you know, we have that kind of musical thread in our relationship. So to carry that on to the next generation is pretty cool. Anyway, so what else we've been doing? We had a big leadership strategic planning meeting happen at Goulet Pens this week. It's always crazy. I've talked about in personal messages and Q&A just like how busy we are right now. My daughter's got a birthday party this weekend. Our son has a birthday in January. So like this is the season for us. It's the busiest holiday season for us for our business. Personally, it's crazy. We have a lot of like choir church things going on. And it's a lot. It's a lot for us this time of year. I know a lot of you feel kind of the same way. You have seasons where things just really ramp up. And this is definitely one for us. In addition to like, okay, this is where the business comes to a year end. We do our strategic planning. We do our year end closing of the books for accounting and all this kind of stuff. It's pretty intense. But anyway, very rewarding though. Everything we're doing right now is very, very full. We have a very full life right now. But what else we got? So we had the last push for the holiday delivery. So by the time this video publishes, you know, you might be able to overnight something and get it in time before Christmas. But pretty much we've passed most of our shipping deadlines. So hopefully you got what you needed. Worst case, there's always gift cards, right? Gift credits. So that's one option for you at our store. Let's see here what else we got. Yeah, I'm taking off Q&A. I mentioned that. No, right now next week, because we have so many people out and all that. So we're gonna be chilling a little bit on the videos. We will have some cool videos coming out, some you know, like 2019 wrap up videos. So they'll be good. And then we have some new products that came in. We kind of did a really soft, kind of quiet launch of ST DuPont, specifically the Atelier Line D. So this is one model of pen that they have. It's a pretty full size pen and very, you know, like luxury kind of, you know, category, I guess, of pen. So ST DuPont, they've been around for quite some time, making some really high-end pens in France, and they have been pretty quiet in the pen community for the last 10 years or so. They haven't had, you know, they do a line of pens and they do a line of cigar lighters. And I think the distributor previously was more or less a cigar company, Davidoff. And you know, it's fine, but they weren't really focused on the pen market so much. So ST DuPont's been kind of under the radar for the last many years. But they're making some good stuff from what I understand. They have a vision for wanting to kind of revamp you know, how they do things. And this is all in the US. I don't know about distribution worldwide, but maybe it's you know, more well-known brand in other parts of the world. But it's been relatively quiet in the US. So anyway, the distributor now is Coles of London, the same folks that do Visconti. So I think that there's going to be some good things that happen there. We talked to them back in August, and we've been excited about, you know, doing something together with them, but we've had a lot going on. It was coming into the holidays, and it was just like, we can't lean full into it. So we put it kind of on the back burner once we had some of the bandwidth. We did kind of a soft launch. So we're going to do more of a full kind of analysis, not analysis, but more of like a full introduction of these. More in 2020. But anyway, we have some if you are interested. They're high quality pens, gold nibs, all metal pens, and they are Urushi lacquer finish. So there's some really interesting designs going on some of these very high quality pens. And if you're familiar with their cigar lighters at all, which they're really known for, it's got a very distinctive, kind of clink sound when you close the cap of their lighters. And it's very much similar to the pen, so it matches that. Anyway, if you're interested in that, it's a nice writing pen. Gold nibs are made by Bach, but they're like a custom nib that they do specifically for ST DuPont. So we've got some of those now, and you'll hear us talk more about those in the coming year. We also had, just kind of sneak in here right before Christmas, we had the TWSBI ECO T in mint blue. So this is a really, we didn't really find out about this pen until, honestly, like a couple weeks ago. And it's been much anticipated. Got delayed just a little bit, but here it is. And if you're wondering kind of what it's similar to, there was a mint Kaweco Sport, Classic Sport, that very similar to that, just a tad more saturated in color, but very similar vein to that. It's just slightly more green. But if you liked this one, I think you're really going to like this ECO T as well. TWSBI's been strong with the colors this year. Definitely more of that pastel range instead of the jewel tone that they've done in some of the other Ecos this year. But if you're into that color scheme, you'll be happy with it. It's a pretty well-known model of pen now, very affordable, and it's actually in one of the Q&A questions this week, the ECO, so I'm going to talk about it a little bit more. We launched that on Tuesday this week, and then TWSBI Ink, we found out we're not going to be getting until after Christmas. The shipment got delayed and stuff, but that'll be coming soon. It's got some cool bottles and stuff. I haven't seen it in person yet, but I will be talking about it once I do. And then last thing is the All-Star Tourmaline. That's going to be coming in February. I mentioned that already, but we're going to be publishing a video, so go check that out because it's going to be pretty good. All right, I have a lot of pens to show today on a couple of questions, so I'm going to get right to it. Starting out with pen and writing questions, this is from Juban Ali Khanin on Instagram. Hello, Brian. In the last 2 months, I went all out and bought 3 expensive pens that shall not be named. All of them skipped and hard started even after multiple cleanings, and I ended up returning all of them. This left a bitter taste in my mouth, and I'm starting to question this hobby. Did I just have very bad luck, or is my writing angle just weird, or are getting QC issues out of hand these days? Thanks in advance. So I wanted to take this question because I don't want to always just, take softball questions that are fun and easy to answer. This one's a little bit tougher, right? Because nobody likes to admit, especially as a retailer, that there could ever be problems with any of the products we sell, especially expensive ones, right? But the fact of life is we live in a physical world, and in a physical world there are things that are not perfect, and that is definitely the case. No matter what pen it is, it can happen. Crazy things can happen. Usually what you see is a pretty high level of quality control, especially with some more expensive pens. There's usually a lower volume of them, which means more personal attention can be given to each one of them. However, it still doesn't mean perfection. We do kind of keep track a little bit of, which pens that we see get returned and have issues and things like that. Overall, our rate of return across all pen brands is really pretty low, and when things start to get out of hand, it's fine. I will say that usually the more expensive pens tend to get more attention and people talk about the problems more, partly because expectations are higher. If you have a little imperfection on a lower price pen, people are less likely to dissect it and really talk about it, and it's less of a scandal because people just kind of accept, okay, it's a lower price pen. When it's a more expensive pen, the expectations get higher, and so it just kind of magnifies any issue that there could be. That's kind of like more in like the macro perspective, like what you see posted on social media and things like that. But you're talking about your own personal experience, 3 different pens, not great experiences. The tough thing about this question is I don't know which pens you're talking about. I can't, and you were dignified, and you're not bashing any particular brand or anything like that, and that's fine. I appreciate that. It does just mean I have to speak in generalities to answer your question. I can't get super nuanced, and that's fine. Really specifically, you're talking about the way they write, skippy, not running. What did you say exactly? Hard started, skipped and hard started. So there's several reasons that can cause this. Yes, you did the right thing by doing cleaning and inking all of them. If they're expensive and you've done multiples, I'm going to make some kind of assumption that you're not, you know what you're doing in the pen world. It's, never want to assume that everybody's like a pen expert, because, we do a lot of troubleshooting here at Goulet Pens, and people of basically all walks of life, all experiences with pens, can run into issues that they've never had before, and can run into certain things. So what I will say is that there's some pens that play nicer with some inks than others. You can definitely run into some maybe hard starting or skipping things because of ink choice. And especially if somebody's always used one particular type of ink, they are using a different type of pen that they've never used before. It's very expensive and it's kind of out of maybe their normal rotation. And that ink, for whatever reason, just doesn't play quite as nice. That can happen. So I always recommend, if you're having skipping or hard starting, clean it first, just like you've done. And then maybe try a couple of different inks, maybe some that you have experience with and are not troublesome, pretty conventional, good flowing inks, just to rule that out as is it the ink? So if it's not the ink and it might be the pen, that helps. Try down a couple different papers too, some more absorbent paper, some less absorbent paper. Paper can be a big factor as well, because it can either really absorbent paper can either draw so much ink out of the pen that it can cause it to, again, have some of those skipping issues. Especially if you're using a really dry ink, you're using a nib that's maybe a little bit stingy, and it's really wanting to absorb that ink out of there. It's like if it's not coated heavily at all, it's like an inkjet type paper that can kind of suck the ink out of the nib before it wants to naturally draw down. That can happen. But oftentimes I think what happens is you end up with pens that have either gold or some other soft metal nib that can perhaps have a little bit of what's called baby's bottom. And this is, unfortunately, you would think that it would be absolute perfection from every company, but this is something that you do see from time to time. Nibmeisters will talk about this. It takes like extra steps, extra precaution to not do baby's bottom. This is basically when you grind a nib, if you're looking straight at the nib with the two parts of the tipping, right? So these are the two parts of the two halves of the tipping. What happens is basically when you're smoothing the nib, because the gold is softer, sometimes it can actually spread the tines a little bit, which when you're smoothing it, it can tend to maybe round out a little bit the middle of the tipping right on the inside. And if it rounds out too much, it can cause a bit of a gap there where the paper is, and it can break the capillary action with the pen. Maybe it doesn't always happen, and if you're pressing harder, that usually helps with the ink flow too. This can be affected by writing angle, writing speed, definitely the ink, the paper. There's so many different factors that can happen here, but basically if the nib is not tuned and ground kind of optimally, there could be situations that arise in very specific scenarios where you can have some skipping and hard starting and things like that. The reason that they tend to over polish that is so it doesn't feel scratchy. But then, of course, if it doesn't feel scratchy and you end up having baby's bottom, you can have hard starting issues, and depending on your writing style and angle and stuff like that, that can be worse for maybe you versus somebody else. So that's why sometimes you might feel like a crazy person, because you're like, no one else is talking about this issue. I've had 3 of these pens. I'm having a problem. This is where it is really nuanced, and it helps to talk to somebody that really knows what's going on. Whether it's a nibmeister or some other kind of expert. Obviously our staff, we try to do that. It's tough to know the absolute mechanics of every nib size of every single pen down to the degree of grinding and stuff like that, but we really try, especially if you're having like a repeated issue. Again, I don't know if you bought from us specifically, because you didn't mention that. You just mentioned you returned all of them. So I know in situations we've had multiple returns with people having issues a lot. Sometimes it does happen across pens of all price ranges, where there can be a repeated issue, and it's like Murphy's Law, right? It's just, if there's going to be an issue, we're gonna have like no issues anywhere, and then one person's gonna have the same issue like 3 times in a row. Complete freak circumstance. It does happen. It's very, very rare, but that can happen even with expensive pens. But we try to look out for that, and we really try to combat that. But a lot of times it comes down to just individual style and things like that. This is where it's tough as an online retailer, because we can't see your writing style. We try and do videos, we try and talk through that stuff, but it is a little tougher. Whereas if you're in person, you can maybe troubleshoot that a little bit easier. Anyway, that was kind of one part of your question. Yeah, it can happen. There's a couple other parts to your question. You know, did you have bad luck? It could very well be. It could be something nuanced that, you know, if you try different writing angles and speeds and papers and ink and all that kind of stuff, it could just be a particular combination, and maybe just that style of pen doesn't work for you, or maybe that nib size is just not conducive, or it could be that pen is really good, but just the way that that pen happens to be ground particularly is not great for your individual writing style. And that's where something like having it tuned or reground from a Nibmeister could be good just for your individual style. Especially, I know there's some people, you know, this is why they make things like oblique nibs. There's some people that really have a heavy rotation of the pen in their hand, or maybe hold their pen at a certain angle where, you know, there's just not the exact correct contact on there, and people don't want to conform their hand to meet this one specific style that is optimal for whatever particular pen. And it could just be that, you know, just a regrind or slight adjustment of that by a professional could really just change the whole game for you. It's not worth it to do that maybe on every pen, but on the really nice ones that you've invested in, it could be worth it. And I know it's like a tough spot, because if you're thinking, well, I already spent a lot on this pen, it should just work. This is where it gets nuanced, and it helps to go back and forth a little bit, because you might need some adjustment based on your own personal writing style, and that's where a professional would really be able to help with that. Sort of like if you buy a really expensive suit and it doesn't fit properly, it's like, well, you get it tailored and then it fits you properly. You know, it's like, maybe it's not always a one size fits all kind of situation. It might not be anything defective or wrong with the pen. It might just be your own style. And with these, especially with pens with gold nibs, if they're really soft nibs especially, you could end up with that as more of a potential. Could be an expectation thing. Maybe you're just thinking, I should never have a skipping issue. We do end up with that sometimes, where it's like, you know, what we know, since we use so many different pens, okay, skipping every X number of letters or X number of words is perfectly normal, perfectly acceptable. But we've literally had customers sometimes that write, you know, I'm not joking, like 5 full pages, and they circle, you know, it skipped here on page 1, skipped to the bottom of page 2, twice on page 3, and we're like, that's very normal, but they want it to be perfection. I'm like, it's not going to be like that. It's not going to be like that pretty much from any brand out of the box. If that's your standard, this is going to be a tough thing for us to achieve for you. And again, this is where a individual, you know, perfection kind of tuning might be where you want to look. You know, and there's no like line where we can say like, this is where this pen should be. It should only skip X number of times per words or whatever. I don't know. It's very kind of subjective, and it's up to the individual to determine what is acceptable and what is not. It's always a bit of a gray area there. So that's a tough line that we walk as retailers. But I do empathize with what you're saying. Kind of left a bitter taste. You're starting to question the hobby. Sure. You know, this is like a law of diminishing returns kind of thing. Just because you've spent more on a pen doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have fewer issues, or that it's going to be that much like exponentially higher of an experience for you. It could mean that, yes, the pen is more rare, more collectible. You know, the material is more difficult to work with. Certain things of these you may value, you may not, and it could make the pen more expensive, but not necessarily increase anything of the quality or the things that you might value by spending that much more on it. You know, the law of diminishing returns basically says like, to get a little bit more value further up the line, you're gonna have to pay a whole lot more than you will when you're kind of just first getting into pens. You know, if you buy a $3 pen, the difference between a $3 and a $10 pen could be significant. Or, you know, a $5 pen and a $30 pen could be a huge difference. But the difference between you know, a $300 pen and a $305 pen, basically no difference, you know, could be. Or you could have a pen that's $200 that works better for you than a $2,000 pen. So there's a lot of things that come into play here. And that's something that can be frustrating for sure, especially as you're learning and you're kind of just investing in some of these higher end pens. It gets tough. That's where it's good to buy from a retailer, like you said, that where you can return them. And if you're like, look, I'm trying and this is just not working. Okay, cool. We'll work with you on that. And certainly us here, it's like, if it's a preferential thing, you're like, oh, I've inked it up and I've tried it and I just don't like it or whatever, that's one thing. But if it's like legitimately not working, you know, we'll always make that right as a retailer. Not going to make you kind of foot the bill for that. And that does get tough because there's a lot of time invested on both sides where you got to troubleshoot all that, and that gets tough. But going back to the pens that you know and love can be really good. Like if you're just discouraged, you know, I've been there myself when I first kind of got into the hobby, and I think I had, you know, maybe 1 or 2 gold nib pens that I just gotten into. I had a Lamy 2000, I had a Pilot Custom 74. I was like, great, and I wanted a Pelican M800. It was like, in my dream camp. I was really into stub nibs at the time. Pelican, they came out with, I got a blue M800 with a 1.5 millimeter stub nib, right? And it had a little bit of this baby's bottom issue. And I expected it to just blow my mind, and I experienced some of the hard starting type of stuff that I've talked about here. From what I understand, at that time, this was 9 years ago or so. They hadn't done this nib in a while, and it wasn't tuned to the way that I wanted it to write, and really put a bad taste in my mouth. It was like a $600 pen at the time, or $550 or something like that. And I was just like, it really took the wind out of my sails for a bit. Now I'm in the pen business and all that, but I think I was meant to have that experience just so that I would be able to empathize in situations like these. Like, just because I spent X multiples over previous pens that I really, really liked didn't necessarily mean I was never going to have a problem. And so that was a good lesson to me. And I do keep that firmly in mind, having that personal experience to reflect on as I come across situations like yours. So my encouragement is to, not get too bad of a taste in your mouth, right? Just kind of keep it in perspective. Go back to the pens that you know and love. Hopefully you have some that you really relied on, that you really enjoy, and just use those for a little bit. Let, time heals all wounds, right? Maybe go back, reflect on it a little bit more. If you're listening to what I'm saying here, maybe they'll give some perspective and help you with that. But I think you can ease back into some of the higher end pens naturally. Maybe if you can get some in your hands, try them, really get to experience them, whether it's a pen show or a physical store or whatever it is. You have some friends that are into them that you're kind of interested in those pens. Maybe do a swap, or see if you can test them in some way. That can really help just ease your concern as you get back into it. But certainly whatever pens you're buying, talk to the retailers, talk to people that are in the business that really know these pens well. And if there's a legitimate issue, can pass that feedback up to the manufacturers, and hopefully over time make that a better issue. But I would say, don't lose heart. There's light at the end of the tunnel. It's a lifestyle, this whole fountain pen thing, and it's something that you can really enjoy over time. But it's complicated. Fountain pens are actually amazingly complicated. The physics behind them and all that, and how they flow well. So to have like no issues whatsoever is actually remarkably difficult to do. So maybe don't just like make a blanket like, I curse this brand because they didn't make something based on my experience. Like, I understand that, but with the right retailer, with the right distributor, with the right manufacturer, they will want to make perfection for every single product and try to achieve that as closely as possible. So, your feedback is greatly appreciated, and I empathize. I do. All right, Mush ABD on Instagram asked, Eco versus 580. Is the 580 worth an extra $30? Okay, so I got one of each here. Got a 580, got an Eco. This is the Eco Clear, because I thought, why not compare the clear and the clear? This is a completely debatable question, and the answer for a lot of people is going to be no, and the answer for a lot of other people is going to be yes. So I think there is no one straight and clear answer. For me, the answer is it depends. It depends on what you value. It depends on how much $30 means to you. To some people, $30 is like pocket change. To other people, $30 is all the difference in the world. So I would say that this question can vary based on what your value of $30 means. I think the Eco is an incredibly like, feature-packed pen for the price. So for me, it sets a pretty tough standard for future pens. It's a piston-filling pen. The fit and finish is really good. It's got a nice cap seal, so it'll stay working for a really long time. There's good nib choices. Aesthetically, it looks nice. The hexagonal cap, maybe everybody's not crazy about. And I can get that, but I don't mind it at all. I think it's a great pen. So for under $30, the Eco is a pretty darn good pen. You're not necessarily getting like multiples of value over the Eco when you go to the 580, depending on what it is you're looking for. The advantage you get with the 580, the nib is slightly bigger. Aesthetically, it's just kind of nice. It doesn't really change how it writes, honestly, but it's a thing. You can get replaceable nib units, so you can get whole grip section and nib and everything, so you can actually swap them out between the pen. That's kind of nice. Eco doesn't have that. Obviously there's aesthetics to it. You get the diamond, effect on the barrel, which looks pretty cool, very classy. There's a lot of different color options in both pens, but you get the all version. You can get the aluminum component versions on the 580. You pay a little bit more for those even, but looks really nice, and some durability aspects and stuff there. The clip and stuff, you get kind of this you know, vegetable peeler clip, as some people call it, on the Eco, and it's a little nicer of a clip. Here you get this, you know, the finial on the top is a little jazzed up on the Eco versus, or sorry, it's a little jazzed up on the 580 here. You know, it's under that, you know, under that resin, so it has a little more shine to it. It's a little flatter looking here. So it's, again, it's mostly aesthetics, and it's these finer details. Both pens assemble, the piston mechanisms are largely the same. Ink capacities are really pretty similar. The way they write is going to largely be very similar. So it depends on how you're using the pen. You know, if you want something that's going to be like a little bit nicer pen that you carry around and aesthetically, and you like that better, yes, I do think the 580 is worth an upgrade, because you're getting all the same great features with some nicer components to them. Purely just with how it writes, and if you're, you know, say a student and you're just wanting to write in large quantities, and you maybe would value having a second pen with a different nib size, maybe you want a fine and a broad, or an extra fine and a 1.1, whatever. You could get 2 Ecos and forego the 580 and be absolutely thrilled and duplicate your value and have outlaid really largely the same amount of money, maybe just a tad more. So largely it's going to depend a lot on some of these things, but either way, you're buying from the same company. They stand behind their products, so that's not really the issue. The packaging, you know, it's a little bit nicer, something unlike the Eco T, you know, comes in a box like this. The full 580 comes in this like nice, like Apple-esque looking, like hard plastic box. So it's your presentation is going to be just a little bit nicer. You know, the wrench is a little more durable on the 580 than it is on the Eco. So it's all these just little things that may or may not add value in your eyes, and largely you get to make the choice. But at least now you have a little bit more information. So my answer is it depends. All right, Christina Chaotic on Instagram asked about very short pens. I have very small hands, and I like using the Kaweco Sport unposted. All right, so I pulled a bunch of pens for you, Christina, to hopefully try to help you out. Speaking from personal experience, I will not be able to recommend some of my favorite shorter pens because, well, I really don't like short pens because I have really large hands. So when I use short pens unposted, I'm literally holding it with my fingers, and it's not even touching the back of my hand. But I totally get where you're coming from. You know, everybody's got, you know, hands of all shapes and sizes, and that's wonderful. You know, do whatever makes you happy. So there's no judgment here at all. I'm just saying that from my personal experience, I can't recommend like this is absolutely the best for small hands. I'm just going to say some of the ones that I really like that are smaller that I think you might enjoy. So there you go. That's my kind of caveat. What I will say is that if you go in the category under the top navigation of our website for fountain pens, it has a category there that's called pocket pens, and that's where you'll find some of these. And I have some here that are in there. I have some that aren't in there, and I have some that we don't even sell. But I'm going to share with you anyway, just because I think they're kind of interesting pens, and you might enjoy them. So, and I'm not always trying to sell stuff. Sometimes I'm just trying to educate and entertain. So there you go. All right, so the Kaweco Sports in all of its forms, yes, I think it's a great pen. I showed the mint one earlier, so this is the, you know, kind of classic, classic sport, ice sport, whatever it is. There's metal versions, there's all kinds of things. It's a relatively short pen, so if you like to use it unposted, great. For me, like, I can use it. This is not like the shortest pen in the world. It's possible, but it certainly is one that I'm going to drop while on video. It's just not, it's not as comfortable for me because it often will like hang up in the back of my hand here. I need to have it posted personally when it's on here so that I can write without it snagging. So when I'm doing this and I'm writing, it like wants to dig into my hand. That's just me. My hands are bigger, so different problems, right? Still, great pens. Highly recommend them for someone like you. Kaweco's got another couple of pens that are really, really good for that. So the Lilliput. The Lilliput is about the same length, a little bit shorter even than your Kaweco Sport. So I will uncap that and show you what that's like by comparison. It's a metal pen. They make a brass version. This is the Fire Blue. This Fire Blue is a little more subdued than a normal Fire Blue because I ran it through my washer and dryer in my pocket one day, and it toned down the fire blueness of it. Anyway, unposted, it's even smaller than the Kaweco Sport here. You can see how small that is. It's almost a full nib length shorter. So this one is really, it's almost unusable for me because it's like, I mean, I can almost like just hide it in my hand and write with it. So if I want to be very covert, I can do that. This one for me, I pretty much have to post it. It's a threaded post. To me, that's an extra step. It's a little annoying. So I don't regularly use the Fire Blue. However, as a pocket pen, The Lilliput is great because well, I say it's great. The bad part about it is you can have it in your pocket and not even realize it and run it through your washer and dryer, like I did. But anyway, as long as you're more cognizant than I am, you can really enjoy the heck out of that pen. So there is the Lilliput. And then there's another one called the Supra, which looks very similar to a Lilliput. It's much fatter, so if maybe you don't like the thinness of a Lilliput, you can enjoy the fatter Supra. And what's cool about the Supra that I really like, this one comes in brass. This one, you actually have this middle section here that you can remove. What comes with this middle section, so you can put a full-size converter in it. That I love, so I do enjoy that one. The Supra I'm a big fan of. But you can actually remove this whole middle section, and then the converter won't fit in there in that case, but you can use cartridges or a smaller Kaweco converter. When you do that, the overall length of the Supra is closer to the actual Lilliput. So there you go. The nib itself is a little bit longer, but the body is basically the same length. So if you really like these short pens, but you wanted something a little thicker, maybe take a look at the Supra as opposed to the Lilliput. So very cool pen, very interesting. I personally, am like always taking it apart and clanking around with it, and it's just a lot of fun. So you can configure it in a couple of different ways. So it's pretty neat. So I like that one. I think that's a cool option for you. Let me reassemble this as I move on to my next one. Going on the trend here of smaller metal pens, and then I'll move on with life. The Traveler's brass pen. So this is a pen that comes from the Traveler's notebook company. So they have their own pen, fine nib only. So the nib size is a little more optional, or a little more limited. But I actually was carrying this around my pocket for like 2 years. Really cool pen. So it's a nice snap cap, so there's no threading to have to worry about except when you're replacing cartridges. It's small, it's cartridge only, as many of these pens are. But what's really cool about it is, most of this pen is hidden inside the cap. It's super durable, it's brass, so you can carry it around your pocket. You never have to worry about it getting damaged. And it just, when it posts, it becomes much longer and much more usable for somebody like me with bigger hands, right? Very usable. But if you don't want that, there's not much that it's hanging onto in the back. And look at how short that is while you're writing with it. So again, it's thinner like the Lilliput, but it has the option to be much longer, and it's very quick because it's a snap cap instead of a twist cap. It's very, very handy to just kind of take it out. And the cool thing about this is it's like a little fidget pen too, because you can actually unscrew the ring top on here and you can take off the clip. You can play with all the parts while you're in meetings and annoy everybody. You can take the clip and you can flip it upside down and you can screw it on here, and then you can, here I'm going to show you what I do with it. It's really annoying. I bug the heck out of everybody when I do this. But anyway, so I can screw this on this way, which is bizarre and completely useless, except then you can like spring it like that, or you can put it on a desk, which my desk isn't high enough, but if I have it on a surface like this and I hold it down like that, you can kind of like fling it like that. Super annoying. But anyway. If you're a fidgeter, that pen can be kind of fun. What else we got here? TWSBI's got a couple of good options. Of course, they have some great writing pens. They have some mini versions of their pens. So basically all the TWSBI mini versions. So they have the TWSBI Mini, the piston pen, TWSBI Mini All, that has some of the metal components, similar design, and then the VAC Mini. VAC Mini is just a little bit longer, but still very, very solid pens. If you like those smaller ones, you're going to have slightly smaller nibs than what you would have on like a full-size 580, but still very good pens. Let me compare it to the Kaweco here, unposted. So it's going to be just slightly longer, but you're going to have a piston, much larger ink capacity than what you're going to get with this, unless you're eyedropper converting your Kaweco. Then you get some decent ink capacity. But if you're using a cartridge or a Kaweco converter, you're going to be really happy with an upgrade to one of the TWSBI pens, the TWSBI Minis. And it's a little bit thicker too. The grip is a little bit thicker. You get the VAC Mini 2, which has even higher ink capacity, which is cool. You get closer to like a 2 mil ink capacity, which is going to last you a really long time. Still a relatively short pen, just a tad longer, but still very, very, very workable. You can see there, it's a little bit longer, but it's a great writing pen. So you can enjoy those TWSBIs. What else we got here? This is one that I don't carry, but I would love to. This is the Pilot Petite 1. This is a pen that I've had for 10 years and have enjoyed it. It's a little pocket pen. They sell these in Japan. They don't sell them regularly in the US, though we were asking Pilot USA about them. You know, it's a thing. So it's, you know, a pocket pen for sure. Look how short this thing is. It's so tiny, but it's a really reliable writer. If you're familiar with the nibs from the Varsity, seems very similar to that. So it's got its own proprietary cartridges, that's a little annoying, just, you know, for ongoing usability sake. So you're kind of into syringing and refilling cartridges. Maybe that's not so great, but as a pocket pen, very cool, and they're very inexpensive as well. So that might be an option for you if you can track one of those down. This is a discontinued pen, but still I thought it was cool and worth showing because I have it in my collection. I'm like, how often do I get to pull out the Monteverde Paquito? But this goes back in history a little bit. It's a teeny, teeny, tiny, tiny little pen. And again, this one had the Monteverde mini converter, which it would take, but largely this is a standard National short cartridge, very small nib, but again, this is teeny, tiny little pen. Very cute, very thin, but that was a thing. I think this was around $40 in its heyday, and I don't believe that it's made anymore. So, but still, if you find one of those, they're kind of fun. This one is not a fountain pen, but I just thought I would mention it anyway, just because it's cool and I don't talk about it very much. But Fisher Space Pen, it's very cool as a rollerball. It's got that pressurized cartridge and space and that whole thing, but it's also very, very small. So I just would mention that because I think it's cool and whatever. It's not a fountain pen, so it's dead to me. Other pens that I think are pretty cool. This is not necessarily a pocket pen. I pulled it out for some reason. Actually, I didn't even realize I pulled it out. But a Pilot Prera. This one is, you know, a little bit on the shorter side. It's not a super, super tiny pocket pen, but it is a little bit smaller. And it does fit a converter, which is kind of nice. So, you know, you get into the situation where you get pens that are like, have to be a certain length in order to fit a converter. This is one of those pens, but that's an option for you. It's got a couple of nib selections there that are good. Pilot nibs are great. Other pens that are good, if you wanted to, well, let's go to the Monteverde Monza. Again, this is one that takes a converter as well. Relatively inexpensive. It's shorter. It's not as short as some of these other ones, but I thought I would mention it just because of its inexpensivity. And then another one, if you wanted to go a little bit higher end, go with a gold nib. The Pilot E95S, I think is really good. This is one that's got kind of a longer cap, and a lot of the body is hidden inside the cap. And the smooth snapping action on this one, it just like is one of the best feeling pens of any pen that I've ever had. It just feels so smooth. I guess it's just the resin, the taper, the feel of it. You know, it's got pressure bars on the inside that are really long, so it doesn't grab really firmly. It's just a very gentle, you know, kind of feel on there on both ends. Feels great. So for me, as a full-size pen, it's a very light pen. The nib is very bouncy, so it really feels different than all of these other pens that I've mentioned here. Great writing pen that's full length like that, but if you don't want to cap it in the back, it's really a pretty short pen overall to hold without the cap. So very, very much worthwhile. And this one does take a converter as well, so you get maybe a little better ink capacity than you could, or not ink capacity, you get more ink options than you could in a cartridge form. But you can always refill cartridges with a syringe on any of these pens if you wanted to. And then the last couple that I had were some smaller Pelicans too that I thought maybe were worth mentioning. Pelican M200 or maybe anything in the M100 series that they've ever done. Relatively thin, relatively short. These are piston filling pens, so you're going to get, again, some of the ink capacity benefits that you wouldn't have with, say, a TWSBI. You get nib removal ability on these. These are more expensive pens, steel nibs, so you're going to pay, you know, as much as you would for an E95S to get an M200, but very reliable pens. They have a couple different colors. They have some different styles they've done over the years, like this blue. Worth a mention there. Not as super small and short as some of these other ones, but I thought it was like, I'd put these at the tail end just to kind of casually mention them. And there you go. That's, I think, what I've got for you here in the like pocket pen, small pen recommendations. So hopefully you can find something here that you can really enjoy. All right, let's talk about ink. So Mando Mandy on Instagram, are there any good dupes for Snowstorm in the Diamine Inkvent Calendar? Okay, so I'm going to be talking a little bit about the Diamine Inkvent Calendar in the hottest things of 2019, actually. Even though it came right at the end of the year, for sure, people are buzzing about these Diamine inks. You know, just anytime you get a series of kind of surprise inks, and especially one that's like, you know, well coordinated to have people experiencing them around the same time, you're going to get a lot of people talking about them. So there's good conversation happening. There's some nice reviews out there. Pen Addict has done some. Mountain of Ink has done some nice ones. No official affiliation with either of them, but they've done some nice reviews, so you can check out their stuff. I recommend them. There's been a lot of conversation on Goulet Nation about them. So yeah, there's been, there's obviously 24 different colors, a lot of different options and things that Diamine has developed for this Inkvent calendar. Very cool. So good job, Diamine. Hope we see these more in the future. But the one you're specifically asking me about, Snowstorm. So it's this gray, kind of gray color with a little bit of shimmer to it, like a silver shimmer. So it looks really nice. Snowstorm seems like a very fitting name for it. The one color that I found that was really closest to it was actually another Diamine color, Moon Dust. So if you see them side by side, they're both shimmering colors, both have a silver shimmer to them. So I think that's really similar. The biggest difference is you're gonna have a little bit more of a red sheen to a little bit of a red hue to the Diamine Moon Dust, whereas Snowstorm is, less of that. It's more of a kind of a pure gray, a little bit on the bluer side, not as much red. But I think, honestly, for interchangeability, if you switch from Snowstorm to Moon Dust, give yourself a couple of weeks of not using Snowstorm, you're going to be thinking you're using Snowstorm because it's really pretty close. If you hold them side by side, yes, you can see a difference, but I think you'll be able to appreciate both. Or maybe you just water it down a little bit, and maybe that would help. I don't know. It'd be interesting to experiment with that, but I really think that would do part of it. And we haven't done like full reviews or anything like that on every single Inkvent because that's crazy. It's a lot of work to do that. Mad respect to all of the bloggers and stuff that have been doing that stuff. It's really cool. So thank you to all of you who've been posting stuff about those colors. We've been doing some reveals on Instagram stories and stuff like that. We did swabs of them, but we just haven't had the resources during our busiest holiday season, our holiday time of the year to be doing those. But anyway, really, really kind of cool to see people doing that. All right, next question, disrupting self on Instagram. Will there ever be Pilot Frixion ink for fountain pens? I need to find my Pilot Frixion pen. I had it on my list to pull it, and I think I may have it in my drawer. So give me one hot second here, and I'm going to go get that so I can show you how this thing works. So this is the this is a Pilot Frixion pen. It's not the, because there's multiple of them. This is like a little higher-end Pilot Frixion pen. They make more or less disposable ones, but it's a gel rollerball pen, right? So it's got a refill inside. And I know it's like blasphemy for me to even be talking about this, but it's good for me to just be aware of what's going on in the writing world, right? But no, Pilot, I mean, obviously we sell quite a few Pilot fountain pens. We don't do any of their roller balls or gel refills or anything, so we do not sell Frixion, but I'm very much aware of it because it's a really interesting, innovative thing that they've done. So essentially what Frixion is, it is a thermosensitive ink that looks normal when you write with it, but when you apply friction to it, really heat is what's the byproduct of that friction, the ink disappears and it does not come back unless you put it like chill it out, like put it in the freezer, and then it can possibly come back. I know there's some like notebook types, like I think it's like Rocketbook, or like there's some like Kickstarter type notebooks that are kind of based around this, that you can either microwave or freeze or whatever. I forget what it is, but there's something where you can make it disappear. I think it's microwave. I think if you microwave it, then it erases the entire page. That would make sense with the heat thing. But anyway, so the way this thing works, I'm gonna show you because it's kind of cool. You probably get the concept, and maybe you've had some experience with these pens in the first place, but let's say I want to write something. Okay. I haven't used this pen in a while. Man, so unreliable. Jeez. It's not like a fountain pen, right? Oh, the days of scribbling. Yes. I have not used this pen. I've had this pen for probably 3 years and haven't written with it. Oh, this is embarrassing. Sorry, let me just get this thing primed and going here. I know I have ink in the cartridge because I can see it. We might just have to go with the script. See, this is the kind of thing where I really should have tested this ahead of time. Oh well, it's a busy time of year. I already talked about that. Didn't test my non-fountain pen. Anyway, you get the idea. I have some light scribbles going on there. And then this particular pen, it's got this little blind cap, but some of the disposable ones don't. And it's got this, kind of plastic, top to it. It's not super, it's smooth, but it's not glossy smooth. And basically, it provides you friction so that when, it kind of feels like an eraser. So you know, the heat and the friction from that allows you to erase, right? So if I want to basically undo all of my terrible scribbles, I can do that. So it's kind of cool, right? Like the concept of it is cool if my refill actually worked. It's like kind of getting there now, but whatever. This just goes to prove that I really only use fountain pens, right? So anyway, the root of your question here is, can they make this in fountain pen ink? Theoretically, why not, right? Like it didn't exist in gel ink before and they developed it. I don't know all the details of the science because it's highly proprietary, how this friction stuff actually works. You know, but theoretically it's possible, right? Like you could just take this ink. Gel ink is thicker than fountain pen ink. So you can't just like syringe this stuff out, put it in a fountain pen and call it a day. Could you syringe it out, water it down and put it in a fountain pen and call it a day? I've never tried. But if you were going to experiment with that, I would maybe do it in a pen that you don't care about very much because I imagine that it would probably still not work super great. Maybe there's some way to cut it down, but I believe that the gel ink is a slightly different formulation than fountain pen ink. But anyway, theoretically, yes, you could take whatever thermosensitive components are in that gel ink and you could maybe mix that into a fountain pen ink and you could have a thermosensitive fountain pen ink. I'm guessing. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I've never been told from Pilot that this is possible or that they're working on it or anything. As far as I know, it's not anything that they're working on or have plans on. But then again, they keep things secret sometimes, so it's very possible they could be developed and they could come out with it tomorrow and I would be completely blind to that. But I don't know of anything that's in the works. But I am passing up the feedback that, hey, we're getting asked about this from time to time. The Frixion pen itself is extremely popular. Like the Frixion format in the rollerball form is very, very popular and is you know, competing with the regular G2 rollerball to be America's most popular pen. So Frixion has really taken off. I think there was, you know, just from casually kind of talking to some of the folks at Pilot USA, apparently there was a ton of R&D that was involved, as you would probably imagine, with developing this thermosensitive ink. So, you know, I can imagine, and I'm in total speculation territory here. I have no idea, I have no insider knowledge really about anything with Frixion or what their plans are, but I can surmise, you know, that developing something like this is very expensive. It takes a ton of time, resources, research, energy, patents, all this stuff. I can imagine that being very expensive, and they probably are having to do some math. You know, now that the Frixion's been successful in the gel rollerball format, they're probably doing some math to say, okay, what would it take to develop this in other areas, whether it's, you know, fountain pen or whatever. They're probably doing the math, and they're going to make a determination at some point if the demand is there to support and pay back all of that research and development. Is that the case? I have no idea. I have no idea. I don't know if that's something, a feature that would be desirable. I would be inclined to think that having more or less an erasable fountain pen ink would be pretty darn cool. You know, for sure I'd be interested in seeing if that was a possibility. Like if that was a product that existed, like we would sell that for sure. But I don't know. I don't know that that's anything that they're developing. But I'm going to pass out the feedback, and I think that'd be kind of cool. So really what I wanted to do was take this question so that I can kind of help garner some feedback to see if this is something that you all think is interesting. I would imagine that with the R&D and everything that's involved, I don't know if the components are more expensive, probably. Would you be willing to pay a premium for an ink that you could erase? You know, and then you'd have to have a specific pen that would have like a Frixion type situation or a separate Frixion-y whatever object that you could use basically as an eraser. You know, is that anything you'd be interested in? You know, when you get into like, would they then, you know, make a Pilot vanishing point that has a Frixion, you know, thing on the back of it? Like, probably not. You know, so you'd be into carrying a separate Frixion-y object. You know, so there's hurdles to that and practicality and all that. I imagine these are all things that they're thinking through, even if it's technically possible. Supply and demand, is this a good business decision for them to get into this? You know, I don't know. But if you all get it and you're like, oh my gosh, this would change my life, this would be the best thing ever, and there's like a groundswell of interest in it, and they really latch onto it and it's possible, who knows? Maybe we could see that happen. But I'm not aware of anything in the works on that. But I'd be curious to know in the comments what you think. All right, business question. This is from Art of Katie Alina on Instagram. Do fountain pens and inks go through color trends like Pantone, etc., or do cool designs just become trendy on their own sometimes? I think for sure, there are color trends. I think about some manufacturers that lean into that a little bit more. Lamy, I feel like, is really on top of that. Kaweco does some interesting things with like their frosted stuff. Lamy does like their special editions, Safaris and All Stars. That's pretty good. I remember like neon was popular a while back. We saw neon as a trend from Lamy with some of their special editions. Faber-Castell's leaned into that a little bit. Lloydstrom, the notebook brand, has done some trendier things. Lloydstrom is doing a neon notebook next year, actually, and there's some interesting stuff that's happened in the past related to fairly timely trends. Matte black and demos are kind of always popular, but it really started to become more popular like 10 years ago. Rose gold as a trend is in the last 5 years or so. So more brands are leaning into rose gold trims and things like that. So for sure, that's gained some popularity. I feel like many pen designs really kind of stand on their own. Maybe some a little timeless or something unique they come up with. I feel like there's others that are, not necessarily tied to fashion trends. There's others maybe kind of stand on their own, whether it's like tinted demonstrators, maybe not necessarily a fashion trend in the greater world, but maybe in the pen world, that could be a fashion trend. So thinking like, pens like, on the Pilot with the Custom 74, having like orange and then purple and then Merlot and burgundy and all that, having some like, clear demo type stuff on the Platinum 3776, some of the TWSBI ECOs and ECO Ts, these colored demos. So, that is a little more on trend, like I guess in the pen world. I don't know if it's a larger trend in general. I'm not a super fashionable person anyway, outside of pen life, right? I feel like there's some like specific materials and maybe designs and things that are popular within the pen world that are very specific to the pen world. Think about like ebonite or celluloid and things like that really just for practicality, whatever practical reasons, just aren't a material that you really see like elsewhere in the world, but in the pen world it's much more of a thing. So some of those, I think about pens like the Visconti Voyager 30, the ebonite that came out that was pretty popular, the Montegrappa Amiraglio and the Mia, things like that use a celluloid, are popular kind of for its own reasons. Those things are more trendy just within themselves, right? I think it often has to do with just what looks good within the brand, the given model pen. I think about like ombre was something that became, kind of fashionable years ago. Waterman, came out with a whole ombre line. Pilot Vanishing Point had the Twilight and the Crimson Sunrise with the ombre with kind of the vibrant colors, a little bit different way than Waterman did it. So, it's interesting that there's some things that tend to be, ombre is something that I don't know if it's still on trend, but I remember it was a couple years ago at least. So you saw some pens with some ombre type of effects that had some popularity to them. Different brands, Lamy, TWSBI, I feel like Visconti, maybe Kaweco, Pilot, Pelican, maybe even Sailor. I think they've done some nice colors that have kind of been on trend with like special editions and limited editions and things like that. So I think that it's not like a universal thing across the whole pen industry, but I do feel like pen companies do pay attention a little bit to that, especially because there is a kind of passion, kind of an excitement component to the pen world, and so whenever there's a potential for something to be kind of trending. It can always vary, but I feel like this is something that really in the last 5 to 10 years has something that a lot more pen companies have been aware of and leaned into a little bit. That's with my trend expertise. Take that for what it's worth. All right, I'm going to end Q&A this week and for 2019 with one final question from the Pen Couple on Instagram. Would you let your kids use your fountain pen collection when they start to write? Whew. Yeah, 900 some pens. For sure, I'd let them use some of them. I'm easing into it. My kids are very soon going to be turning 8 and 10. As I'm shooting this, they are 7 and 9. So yeah, I'm selective about it. I let them use certain pens that aren't of extreme significant value, and ones that I think that would be good and fun and easy to use for kids. I'm not like sending my kids to school with only fountain pens and being like, you must write with fountain pen. I'm not dictating these things. I want them to be interested. I want to expose them to them, just like any parent wants to do with with the things they want their kids to kind of love. You expose them into things. You talk about the good things. You lead by example. More is caught than taught kind of ideology. So I use fountain pens a lot. They're around. They know that everything in our life and everything we raise them with is because of fountain pens. So I certainly, think that there is a level of appreciation they have, even just at the ethereal level, for fountain pens. But, they're not like, that's not the only thing they use. I know it's like scandalous, but just being practical. They use pencils, they use crayons, they use markers, they use, all kinds of other things. But they do have some of their own pens, get some things like Varsities, Pilot Varsities, Gin House Sharks, these types of pens. I like the Varsity because they're relatively inexpensive. The nibs are very, they just ink up and write right away. Pretty good ink capacity, so, if the kids leave it around, it doesn't dry out immediately, and it's, they can use it, and then if they end up mashing the nib, which, especially with my daughter, she tends to bear down a little bit hard on it, or they like to color in large areas with it. They're learning these things of how to properly use them, but, in the learning process, there could be some collateral damage to some of the pens, and, these are inexpensive pens that are not gonna cause any issues, and there's some fun colors too. Pens like Shark pens, are kind of cool. It's got a nice ink window, so I can tell when the pen is run out of ink, because that's usually when things tend to, get damaged with my kids. Is they'll be writing with a pen, and if it'll skip or if it's out of ink, they bear down harder to try to get more out of it, and that's when the nib can get ruined. So Shark pens are pretty fun. There's lots of different colors they can choose from. It's a shark, so it's like a they can kind of play with them too, and stuff like that. So that's kind of how I've been introducing things to my kids. Do they use my really nice pens? No, not really at this point. I'll show it to them and point out some of the features, and but are they writing with my Homo sapiens? No, not at this point. But for sure, over time, as they demonstrate more conscientiousness and care and stuff like that, I'll introduce more of these high-end pens that educate them and kind of introduce them to it. No different than you would any other nice thing you've invested in, any type of collectible thing that you have. So I feel like I'm pretty practical about it. But I think that the kids, I'll let them write with some of my higher end pens with like some specific supervision, but I won't just be like, oh, my Homo sapiens, here you go, just, whatever, as long as it gets back to me. Pens are small, they can disappear. Definitely probably have some pens laying around my house in unspeakable places, but anyway, both of my kids have kind of innocently like talked about wanting to work at the Goulet Pen Company when they grow up. It's very, very sweet, very cute, and they have like, little pictures that they draw where you write a caption, just stuff like that they do at school, and they'll have a picture of them, whatever, working, like family picture, and like, oh, I want to be a leader at the Goulet Pen Company or whatever, and I'm like, that's really cool. We'll see if that keeps up over the years, but I'm not going to force them into it. But introducing them to pens, I think it's good to expose them, just like you expose them to a lot of other things that you're passionate about. I do woodworking, so I'm exposing them to tools, and if I need to whatever, fix something around the house, I'm like, hey, Ellie, here's a screwdriver. Let's go, whatever, unscrew this thing and change the batteries in this toy, So I'm introducing them to these types of things too. Music, hey, here's this instrument. I'll pull out the guitar and like, here, pluck the strings. Here, this is an E, this is a whatever. It's the same kind of concept, just with pens. And obviously I have a lot of them to show, but they can't absorb, everything that's in the full collection at this point. But over time, yeah, for sure, as they show more interest and have more capacity to absorb that, I will have plenty to say. All right, as 2019 is coming to a close here, my question of the week, I guess now question of the year, is what have been some of your most memorable, maybe either Goulet moments as you've been watching some of our videos and stuff, or just, not even specific to us, but just some of your most memorable fountain pen experiences of the year. Maybe you got a really memorable pen, or you had a memorable event that you tied to the acquisition of a pen, or maybe you, I don't know, signed your first mortgage or a marriage license or something like that with a pen, and it was very memorable. I don't know, just, you don't have to get that deeply personal about it, but, maybe just share what's a memorable moment that you had with pens this year. For me, gosh, there's so many of them. But I think, hitting a 10-year anniversary for us this year was pretty darn memorable. And I know that was something that was on my mind for quite some time, still is a little bit. but big milestone, and just, you know, not a pen specific question, but that was a pretty big deal just for me personally. I know we didn't make a huge fanfare of it. We did a couple videos, but for me that was just like, wow, this is, I kind of had a mental shift that was like, yeah, I guess I don't have to, like, you know, work as scrappily as I did in year one. You know, I've learned some things over 10 years, and I can approach this maybe a little more holistically. So that said, Rachel and I still working like dogs and coming up with crazy ideas and stuff. So I don't know, maybe not that much will actually change, but, you know, it was really kind of just a milestone for us to hit 10 years. So that's my answer. Love to hear what you think. You'll have plenty of time to draft and read other people's comments, because it'll be 2 weeks before I'm back here. So anyway, we'll have other videos that'll come out, and I just hope you have a great rest of your year in 2019 here. I know I will. That's all I got for you. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching, and right on.